Good morning, Evergreen. I hope this finds everybody doing well. Today's chapter is chapter 12. The title is The Cryptsic. Author is my dad and myself. My dad chipped in on this one. It was kind of fun working with him on that. This is kind of a longer one. It's probably about 10 or 12 pages. So get comfortable. Fangspew and T-Moss tooled up the path, heading toward T-Moss's home in the early fall dusk. They were not in a hurry, goofing along, really, when T-Moss stopped suddenly. Fangspew, happily humming to himself, took another hop and only realized T-Moss was not with him when he landed. T-Moss scurried to catch up, held up his hand for Fangspew to be quiet. Shh! Did you hear that? Fangspew stood very still, only his eyes moving to show that he had heard T-Moss's whispered question. T-Moss pointed off to the side. There's something over there, something large, trying to be quiet. Fangspew nodded, his frog face screwed up in concentration. He heard the footsteps of an approaching animal when it stepped on some of the dead leaves covering the ground. The frog and gecko scooted quickly to the side of the path and ducked under some of the same dead leaves. With only their heads sticking out, they watched, waited. Moments passed. The two friends weren't particularly worried. They were hidden well, but they were surprised when Hocus, the deer, stepped out in the path. Hocus had grown up. He had a rack of antlers on his head. Fangspew croaked out to him and hopped back onto the path. Hocus smiled, pleased to see them, since he'd been searching for the two of them. The three friends joined up, making a strange-looking group, I can tell you, and walked slowly toward T-Moss's home as they caught up on the news. First of all, Hocus told them about his growing family. It consisted of 4 female deer and 3 kids, with another on the way. He was a proud daddy. Fangspew told Hocus about getting married. Congrats, interjected Hocus. Sure is great, isn't it? T-Moss told the story about losing his tail to the mandible bug Cilius. Hocus carefully inspected T-Moss's newly regrown tail and pronounced it as good as the old. After bringing each other up to speed, Hocus shared the sad news that Pocus, his twin brother, was dead. He died 2 days earlier, killed by a cryptsic. Hocus didn't know what to do about the cryptsic, but was sure that it would come back to do some more hunting. Normally, in the face of a skilled predator, deer will simply run away. If the predator makes its home where the deer live, the deer will move on to another area. However, Hocus didn't want to leave Black Pond. The deer have lived there for a long time, and for Hocus it's home. But in order to protect his family, he told Fangspew and T-Moss, he might need to take all 7 of them and move to a place where the cryptsic couldn't follow. As much as he loved this area they call home, his first responsibility was the safety of his wife and children. Wives and children. The frog and the gecko were quiet during the story, dismayed at the death of Hocus, and saddened that their friend might have to move. Fangspew, Hocus, I know very little about cryptsics. What are they? What do they do? Can we fight them? Hocus heard Fangspew's choice of pronouns, we, and was deeply grateful. He needed the help. He needed ideas. Well, the cryptsic is a large dog-like animal with pointy ears, small mouth, big eyes. Fangspew interrupted, waving his hands. Slow down a bit, Fangspew said. You travel over a lot larger area than we do. What is this dog animal you're talking about? Oh, sorry, Hocus said, shaking his head. A dog is a lot like a large fox or a coyote. I was just trying to let you know something about the same size as the cryptsic. It's smaller than a deer, except a young one, and a lot bigger than either of you. Fangspew and T-Moss looked at each other, not smiling. They both looked back at Hocus, who continued. Okay, he said. It may have big ears, but don't let it fool you. The cryptsic can't see well at all, particularly in the daylight. But it really didn't need to, because it hunts at night and has an amazing sense of smell. And of hearing, too. I'm surprised you two haven't heard of them yourselves, because rumor has it can track a frog through an algae-covered swamp, and that it enjoys snacking on them. Maybe they're only snacks because it actually doesn't have a lot of luck catching frogs or geckos due to its unique method of hunting. Fangspew wasn't really sure that he wanted to hear about the details of how the cryptsic hunted, because he was fairly certain that he would remember it all. Those details would likely come back in the skeletal framework of a nightmare. On second thought, though, he realized that perhaps he did need to know about their hunting methods in order to defend himself and his family against them. Hocus continued. The cryptsic is actually a disease carrier. It is some kind of breathing disease, and the cryptsic has learned to kill its prey by, and this sounds disgusting, sneezing in their face while they sleep. Horrors, right? The cryptsic seems immune to the disease, but for the victim, it's fast-acting and fatal. One sneeze before midnight, the victim's dead by morning. That's when the cryptsic returns and drags off the corpse. Hocus paused for a moment here, then continued in a slightly choked voice. And that's what happened to Pocus. I'm afraid it will happen to the rest of my family if I can't think of some way to keep the cryptic and his diseases away from us. Fangspew wanted to help his friend's sadness by changing the topic to something that might help solve the problem. Well, what methods have you tried so far to keep it from happening? Hocus brightened a bit. Okay, the only thing we could think of was to make sure we slept at night with our heads together. To get to our faces so he can sneeze on us, he'd have to step over our bodies, and he can't do that without waking us. And I know, he held up a hoof to stop the obvious question. That sounds like all wrong since a single sneeze can infect all of us, but because of cryptic's size, it just can't sneak up toward our heads without waking someone. We're all spread out on the ground like petals on a daisy, and that doesn't give the cryptic much room to do his sneaking. Timo shook his head. You need something more effective than just changing your sleeping habits. Hocus nodded. Yeah, I know. He looked miserable. This sleeping like a flower spread out on the ground is a temporary fix. Sooner or later, the cryptic is going to find a clear path to where he can creep up and infect more than just one of us. We need to come up with something better. Fangspew sat there on the foot of Timos's tree, thinking. You said he only attacks at night when you're sleeping. Where does the cryptic sleep, and when? Hocus shook his head. I really don't know. I've been more concerned about staying away from the cryptic than getting close to it. I've heard that it lives in caves and sleeps during the day, but I don't know where his cave is. I sure hope there aren't more than one of them out there. Fangspew nodded. That might help explain the large eyes. They're too large to be useful during the day, but at night it'll see pretty well. If it lives in a cave, so much the better for seeing in the dark. Timos chimed in. But that still doesn't answer where this cryptic lives. If it hunts at night when we're asleep and hides during the day when we're up and running around, how are we going to find it? Hocus spoke hesitantly. I really don't know. I really don't want to wait until it attacks again just to try and track it back to its home. There's got to be a better way. Timos squinted his eyes, twisted his mouth slightly to the side, thinking, I wonder. I could ask if the birds, if they know anything. They fly all around and may have seen something. Worth a try, Fangspew said. You talk to birds? Hocus asked, surprised. I have many talents, Timos said modestly. I just don't like to brag about them in front of my inferiors. Hocus snorted and Fangspew looked sideways at his friend, smiling. Timos scampered up his tree. In the upper branches he called out for any bird that might be around. In a very short time he was rewarded by seeing Flutterby soaring in toward him, and then short, powerful wing strokes maneuvered through the branches down to land near him. Timos shook his head in wonderment. I still don't see how you can miss all those branches, he said. Flutterby grinned, which is not easy for a bird, and chirped, We don't let you see our mistakes. What can I help you with? Flutterby was really a very nice friend to have. We're trying to find out where the cryptic lives. It's been threatening a friend of ours, and we're trying to figure out a way to stop it. Flutterby used one of his feet to preen a wing feather. I don't know myself, but I'll pass the word around. I'm sure someone has seen where it lives. It's not really one of my favorite animals. It swats at us when we get close to it, as if we wanted to snatch its prey from it. When I see it, I usually find a pretty good reason to zoom and peck at it before it even knows I'm there. Flutterby nodded. Let me see what I can find out. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Timos scurried back down the tree. I've spoken to Flutterby, and he said he'd check around. We should know something soon. In the meantime, I'm late for my bedtime. Shall I catch up with you two tomorrow morning at the pond? The friends agreed to meet mid-morning. Hocus set off to rejoin his small herd. Fangspew hopped back to Black Pond, and Timos climbed back up in his tree to the snug hole. He curled in tight ball and was asleep in moments. It was early the next morning, just as the sun was barely peeking through the light fog, when Flutterby's singing voice woke Timos out of his sound sleep. I found out where he lives, she announced. He stays in a cave over near Flat Rock Hill, and he's been living there for a while. Flat Rock Hill, repeated Timos. Is that very far from here? Chirped Flutterby, clearing her throat. As the crow flies, it's really pretty close. Timos closed his eyes and shook his head. I'm almost sorry I asked. Bird humor evades me. Yes, we are pretty comic, Flutterby chirped. It keeps both body and feathers together. Which direction is Flat Rock from here? Come back up here and I can point it out to you. Timos climbed back up to where Flutterby was perched. Flutterby lifted her head and pointed with her beak toward the nearby small hill that Timos could see. That's Flat Rock Hill. The cryptic lives on the left side of it, where all the rocks are piled. Okay, said Timos. That helps a lot. I'll give you a worm. Oh, just a juicy bug would be enough. It wasn't all that hard to find out what we needed to know. Back down to the ground, T-Mouse found his friends talking down by the pond. He shared with them the information Flutterby had uncovered. I've been there, Hokey said. I never knew that anyone could live in that pile of rocks. Could you take us over there? Fangspew asked. Sure, how good are you at hanging on? You can hold on to an ear with a hand, gently, of course, and grab onto my antler with the other. It shouldn't take very long for us to get there. Fangspew and T-Mouse looked at each other and grinned. Well, it's a poor substitute for flying, T-Mouse said. But it beats hopping, Fangspew nodded. Flying? What's this about flying? Hokey asked. You guys can't fly. We'll whisper in your ears while we're on the way, Fangspew said. The trip over the flat rock went smoothly as long as Hocus didn't trot. When the three friends got to where Hocus Hocus walked quietly around the side of the hill where the Cryptic lived. There, T-Mouse pointed. Look over there. That looks like an opening into a cave. Hocus walked softly closer to the mouth of the cave. I can see a path going into the cave and some prints along the path. This has got to be where the Cryptic lives, Hocus whispered, moving his head lower so T-Mouse and Fangspew could see. But how do we know for sure? Fangspew spoke softly. It could be some other animal in there. They were silent as they thought about this. Hocus started to shake his head, but remembered just in time that he would sling his two friends off if he did so. He moved away from the cave far enough for them to speak normally to each other. Fangspew spoke first. I've got an idea for a trap, but there's no sense in making it if it's not where the Cryptic lives. He cleared his throat. I guess one of us needs to sneak in there and make sure it's the right cave. Hocus spoke first. Sorry guys, it should be me, but I'm not the right size to do that kind of cave sneaking. T-Mouse spoke slowly. Well, I suppose I could do it. It wouldn't be my favorite activity for the year, but I can fit and really keep low to the floor. No, Fangspew said, it's my idea, and that makes me the one to go. I can move really slow and quiet when I need to, and if I need to, I can hop out really fast. I would be a lot harder to catch if the Cryptic wakes up. They talked a bit more and finally decided that Hocus could stand at the side of the cave entrance where, if the Cryptic chased Fangspew, Hocus would have an opportunity to kick him as he left the cave. T-Mouse picked a spot above the cave door where he quietly piled a bunch of rocks to throw if Hocus missed the kick. None were large enough to hurt the Cryptic, but they might distract it from trying to catch Fangspew, they hoped. Fangspew, for his part, tried to think stealthily in invisible thoughts as he carefully entered the cave. It was really dark inside, and he had to feel his way along the wall of the cave as he went. This was no fun, and, in fact, Fangspew would have to admit that if frogs could perspire, he would be sweating. He slid along the wall, listening carefully for any noise ahead of him. He realized there was a rank odor from somewhere deeper in the cave, and became aware of the slow breathing of a sleeping animal. That doesn't help, he said to himself. It could be a wildcat, a badger, even a small bear. No, not a bear. I'm just scaring myself. He crept closer to where the animal lay. He became conscious of a feeling of warmth from the sleeping animal and stopped for a moment. There's no way for me to know what kind of animal it is unless I can get it to chase me out in the open so we can see it. That was a grim realization indeed. Fangspew was none too happy. Being chased by an animal angry about being woken out of a sound sleep, particularly an animal with claws and teeth and probably an appetite for tender, fresh-caught frog snacks, wasn't an appealing thought for Fangspew, but he could think of nothing else. He hoped his friends were keeping alert. He slowly crawled down to the sleeping animal, finally stopping just as his nose touched a wisp of the fur that gently moved in time with the animal's breathing. Fangspew turned, faced back toward the mouth of the cave, took a deep breath, then kicked the animal with all his might, launching himself at the same time back toward the cave entrance that suddenly seemed so far away. Fangspew got in 3 quick hops as the animal grunted and then growled, turning to attack whatever it was that had interrupted his sleep. Fangspew got 2 more hops in as he realized that whatever was chasing him was much faster than he was. The mouth of the cave was only 2 more hops ahead of Fangspew as he heard the animal just behind him. Fangspew gave a mighty hop, one that would have carried him just outside the opening of the cave, and whacked his head on the ceiling of the cave. He fell, unconscious, to the floor, as the snapping animal, unable to stop, ran past him, almost trampling him as he tried to backpedal. Fangspew did not hear the solid thump of Hocus's hooves on the side of the Cryptic as it slid outside the opening of the cave. He didn't hear the surprising pain of the Cryptic's "Yape!" He didn't hear the quick rattle of small rocks that rained down on the Cryptic as T-Mouse did his best to confuse the Cryptic. He came into the gray light of the cave entrance, stood slowly, trying to straighten his spinning thoughts, and then realizing where he was, he scampered out of the cave and off to the side as Hocus kicked the Cryptic again. The deer faced away from the Cryptic, no danger being sneezed on, and lashed out with both sharp hind hooves. The Cryptic, confused and aching, turned and ran past Fangspew into the safety of the cave. It was suddenly quiet. Three friends looked at each other, taking stock, catching breath. Timas exclaimed, "Fangspew, you're bleeding." Hocus stepped over to Fangspew, bent down for Fangspew to climb on his head, then raised up for Timas above the cave entrance to hop aboard as well. Hocus then walked back to the trees near the face of the low cliff where Timas inspected the scrape on Fangspew's head. "You'll live," he announced, after checking Fangspew's injury. "You'll have a scar." "That'll teach me to hop high in a low cave," Fangspew said. Hocus just grunted. "Sure felt good getting in those kicks. Hopefully I broke one of his ribs, but I'm afraid that's not going to stop the Cryptic." "Well," said Fangspew, "at least we know where the Cryptic lives." "Suppose he moves out after the attack," Hocus said. "That'll make it important that we finish this off tonight." Fangspew had also shaken off his dizziness and was playing again. "Hocus, while Timas and I do some looking around, do you think you can trot back to the pond and find some dry reeds for us, and maybe nail off a fairly large vine as well? It needs to be flexible and one that's not too thick." Hocus nodded, ran off. Timas looked inquisitively at Fangspew and then followed him as he moved back toward the hillside. This time he circled around to climb up where Timas had been stationed to throw rocks. "We need to find a big rock, one that Hocus can move down and perch above the cave entrance." "Oh," said Timas. "You're going to roll a rock down on the Cryptic?" "Not just one rock, that might miss. I want a big rock that will hold back as many smaller rocks as we can pile behind it. Maybe we can get some more frogs to help us collect rocks." Hocus reappeared, a long, thin vine caught around his antlers and his mouth full of dry reeds. He lifted them up to where Fangspew and Timas were, above the cave door and off to the side. "What's this about getting some more frogs to help?" he asked. "We've got a bunch of rocks to move and not a lot of time. We're going to need your muscle, and we frogs are going to have to hunt out rocks that you can move for us." Fangspew grinned. "Now, if you can get all antlers, if you could get us all antlers, we could do more. But until then, you're going to have to do the heavy lifting." Hocus nodded. "Bring it on." Fangspew outlined his plan for the reeds to hold back a large rock, pointing out that as long as the reeds were straight, they were quite strong, but they were really weak under any pressure from the side. "I've got a larger reed rock picked out, and I need to get the frogs together. Do you think you two can handle a very large trigger rock?" Timas looked at Hocus. "We sure can give it a try." Fangspew hopped off, heading back toward the pond. He was surprised at the large number of friends who volunteered to help. They had worked with him before and knew that they could trust him as he tried to rid the area of yet another threat. They got back to Flat Rock Hill just after Hocus and Timas finished setting up the large trigger rock in place with several reeds holding it over the cave entrance. After Fangspew warned the frogs not to go into the cave and to be quiet, he gave them their task. The frogs swarmed over the side of the hill above the cave entrance, each standing and waving for Hocus to move smaller rocks that they located for him. Two of the larger frogs stayed behind the trigger rock and carefully placed each of the smaller rocks into position behind the trigger. This took some careful work because they didn't want the reeds holding the trigger rock to shift. They knew that if the rock shifted, the reeds might break and the rocks would fall before they were ready. Finally, after much work, the trap was set. Fragile reeds kept the trigger rock from rolling, and behind the trigger rock were piled many smaller rocks to follow the big one down when the reeds were pulled loose by the long vine that threaded around them. Timas had the job of pulling the vine when the time came, and Hocus was supposed to call out to him when the Cryptic was in the right place. Fortunately for all involved, when the Cryptic slept, it slept very soundly, and all of their preparations, even though they were trying to keep quiet, hadn't awakened it. Fangspew's unenviable task was to sneak back into the cave and to waken the Cryptic again. This was not his favorite thing to do, but he had been successful the first time and believed he could do it again, particularly if he didn't try hopping too high near the entrance. That one headache was enough to last him for a long time. Fangspew knew the ceiling was at least the least of his worries, since he had to be fast enough to escape the Cryptic, and once outside the cave, he had to be faster still to keep from being buried under the rocks they'd be raining down. It was almost dark when all the frogs headed back to the pond and their evening songfest. Timas climbed up above the cave entrance, off to the side, took a firm grip on the vine. One sharp yank on the vine should break the reeds, release the large trigger rock, result in a landslide of smaller rocks. He positioned himself where he could easily see and hear Hocus' signal. Hocus stationed himself off to one side of the entrance, ready to signal to T-Moss when the Cryptic was in the drop zone. And Fangspew, for the second time today, crept slowly back into the cave, expecting the darkness, and this time having an idea of how far he needed to go to get to the Cryptic. He listened carefully, straining to hear the smooth, regular breathing of the Cryptic sleeping. Finally he heard it, slowed a bit, barely moving forward. He didn't want to wake the Cryptic before he was ready to speedily hop out of the cave, and he hoped the Cryptic would be sleep groggy for a moment after he kicked him awake. The smell was there, and Fangspew inched forward until his nose touched the Cryptic fur. Fangspew turned back toward the cave entrance slowly, sliding his rear feet back to where he could kick hard and get his start off and running. But Fangspew had trouble seeing the cave entrance. It had gotten dark enough outside that he wasn't quite sure exactly where it was. He thought he could see it, but any mistake in that direction would likely be his last. He gulped, thought, well, it's only going to get darker. And then he launched a mighty kick at the Cryptic and was off, hearing it snort as it fought itself awake. Yes, he could make out the entrance. Heard the scrabbling behind him as the Cryptic came after him. Fangspew remembered to lower the height of his hops and was very aware of how close he came to the ceiling even so. 6 mighty hops, then he sprang out of the cave, knowing that he still had more big hops ahead of him to get beyond where the falling rocks would hit. He heard Hocus call out to T-Moss, and then the sound of rattling and falling rocks. The Cryptic's breathing seemed horribly close behind him, but suddenly all Fangspew could hear was the crash and thump of the rocks hitting and piling up behind him. One of the last rocks to fall hit and skipped off the top of the pile, flying over Fangspew where it whacked him on the head, right where he'd been scraped the ceiling earlier. Fangspew fell over, landed on his chin, skidded to a stop. Everything was quiet. T-Moss called out, "Fangspew, are you okay?" Hocus stepped slowly over to Fangspew and lifted and sniffed at him as he lay awkwardly on the ground. "He smells okay, but I think it's one of those rocks clipped him. Come here and take a look." "Where's the Cryptic?" T-Moss, as small as he was, knew very well when to be cautious. "He's under all those rocks you dumped on him. I don't think we need to worry about him anymore." T-Moss skittered down to check on Fangspew and laughed. "He's putting us on. He's only pretending to be unconscious." Fangspew sat up. "I am not awake and pretending," he said indignantly. "I am grievously injured and may not live through the night, and I'm starving. I need something to eat to keep me alive." "Oh," he added, "what happened to the Cryptic?" T-Moss most unsympathetically said, "Go see for yourself." Fangspew hopped over to the pile of rocks and the crushed and lifeless body of the Cryptic. "I think he's had his last meal and won't be bothering us anymore." Hocus bent down. "Hop aboard. I'll take you guys back to Black Pond. Then I'm heading back to my family. I don't think we'll need to sleep like petals on a daisy anymore," he smiled. "I shouldn't say this, but one of my wife snores and keeps me awake." The end.